Hello, Julia. Hello, Aureliano. Hello, Florencia. I hope you're all very well. Today, you've got Wei reading the story because Daddy is working. He's been in London today. I don't think he's going to drive to Rotherham. I'm not quite sure why. He got called away very quickly, and I was in one of my classes, so I didn't get a chance to talk to him. He's missing the Manchester United game. He won't be very happy about that, I can tell you. Well, we're all very well here. I'm missing you. I haven't seen you for ages and ages and ages, it seems. But we'll hope to see you quite soon. We hope that you'll come back to England in September and we'll be able to see lots of you then for a little while. But tonight I've got a story for you, and I think it's a story that you know. It's a story called Dick Whittington, and Dick Whittington was a poor boy who made good. He became rich, and the interesting thing about Dick Whittington is that he had a cat. Not sure what the cat was called. Maybe we'll find out in the story. But anyway, I'm going to read it to you now. I've got pictures, so just let me bring up the pictures and then we'll see. Here it comes. There we are. That's Dick Whittington. There he is, sitting on a fence with a little bag over his shoulder, and that's got all his worldly belongings in there. Gosh, when we go, when Weiwei comes to Ecuador, I have a huge suitcase or two. Dick Whittington had everything that he owned tied up in a little bit of cloth dangling from a stick. Gosh. And there he is, setting out to make his fortune. Okay, let's start the story. So, once upon a time, there was a poor boy who was called Dick Whittington. His mother and father were dead, and he had no one to care for him. Dick lived in a small village in the country. He tried to work for his living, but he couldn't always find work to do. He was very poor. His clothes were thin and ragged, and sometimes he had very little food to eat. In those days, people didn't often travel far from the village in which they lived. Dick's village was a long way from London. When the village people talked of London, they spoke of it as a wonderful place. They said that all the people in the city of London were rich. They even said that the streets of London were paved with gold. Dick listened to these tales and he longed to go to London. What do you think? Do you think the streets were really paved with gold? Seems a bit unlikely, doesn't it? Dick thought that if he went to London, he would be able to pick up gold from the streets. Then he'd become rich and would never need to feel cold or hungry again. Dick made up his mind to go to London, although he had no idea how far it was. He put his few clothes into a bundle and tied the bundle to the end of his stick. Then he set off to walk along the road to London. Dick walked a long way, but he didn't reach London. Just as he was beginning to feel very tired, a hay cart came along the road. The driver stopped the cart and said to Dick, "Where are you going, my lad?" "I'm going to London, sir," replied Dick. "Then jump up beside me," said the driver, "and I'll take you to London." Gosh, that was lucky, wasn't it? Wow. When they drove into the city of London, Dick gazed about him in wonder. First, he was very surprised to see how many people there were in the streets. He'd never seen so many people before in all his life. He was also amazed to see all the fine churches, shops, and houses. When Dick had got over his first wonderment, he began to look for the streets that were paved with gold. Nowhere could he find them. It began to get dark, and Dick was tired and hungry. He'd nowhere to sleep, so he had to curl up in a doorway and go to sleep there. Next morning, Dick tried to find work for himself. He walked along street after street asking people for work, but no one had a job to offer him. When night came, Dick was so weak from hunger and tiredness that he sank down on the nearest doorstep. Now, it just happened that this house belonged to a rich man named Mr. Fitzwarren. He was a merchant who made his money by selling things to people in other countries. Mr. Fitzwarren's cook found Dick on the doorstep, and she was very angry. "You lazy boy," she cried, "what are you doing there? Get up from my master's doorstep." When Dick tried to rise, he was too weak and he stumbled. But at that very moment, Mr. Fitzwarren himself arrived home. Mr. Fitzwarren was a kind-hearted man. He spoke gently to Dick and listened to his story. "If it's work you want, you can work in my house for my cook. You'll have food to eat and a bed to sleep in." Dick was so happy that he could hardly find words with which to thank Mr. Fitzwarren. But oh dear, Dick's happiness didn't last long. He soon found that the cook was an unkind woman. She was always telling him off, and sometimes she used to hit him. Mr. Fitzwarren had a daughter named Alice. She was kind like her father, and she knew that the cook was cruel to Dick. Alice took pity on Dick and forbade the cook to hit him. This made things easier for Dick, but he still had to work very hard. Dick's bed was in a cold attic at the top of the house. This attic was overrun with rats and mice. At night, as Dick tried to sleep, the rats and mice ran over his bed. He couldn't rest. "Oh, if only I had a cat," thought Dick. "She'd be a friend to me and she'd chase away the rats and the mice." But all the money that Dick had in the world was 1 penny. Oof, look at those rats and mice. Gosh, I wouldn't like to sleep in that bedroom, would you? It would be awful. They'd be sputtering around all the time. Skittle, skittle, skittle. Oh, no. Well, next day, Dick went to the market with his penny in his pocket. There he saw a woman holding a cat in her arms. "Please, will you sell me your cat?" Dick asked the woman. "I'm not sure that I want to sell her," said the woman. She's a grand cat for catching mice. That's just what I need, said Dick. He pleaded so hard that at last the woman agreed to sell him her cat for 1 penny. From that day, Dick's life became happier. He loved his cat and looked upon her as his friend. At night, he slept well because his cat chased away all of the rats and the mice. Now, Mr. Fitzwarren had many ships that sailed to distant lands. One day, Mr. Fitzwarren called all the servants together. He told them that one of his ships was ready to sail. Everyone was allowed to send something with the captain to be sold in a faraway country. That way, perhaps they could make some money. Do you want to send something on my ship? Mr. Fitzwarren asked Dick. I've got nothing in the world except my cat, replied Dick. Then you must send your cat, said Alice. Poor Dick didn't really want to part with his cat, but to please Alice he agreed. When she'd gone, Dick missed his cat and wished he'd never sent her away. Once more, he couldn't sleep at night because of the mice running over his bed. Dick was so unhappy that he made up his mind to run away. Early one morning, he crept out of the house before anyone was awake. He climbed up and out of the city of London. But he hadn't gone far when the bells of Bow Church began to ring. The bells seemed to be singing this tune to Dick. It went like this. Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London. Turn again, Whittington, thrice Mayor of London. Because it wasn't really singing, it was just going ding, de ding, dong, dong, ding, de ding, dong, dong. But Dick Whittington thought he could hear that tune, those words. He said to himself, if I am to be Lord Mayor of London, I will turn again. So before anyone missed him, he turned back to Mr. Fitzwarren's house and let himself in. Meanwhile, on the ship, Dick's cat was making herself very useful. The ship had been overrun with rats and mice, but Dick's cat was a fine rat catcher, and she soon killed hundreds of them. After sailing for many weeks, the ship came to a far country. The king of the country invited the captain to come to the palace, and a wonderful meal was prepared for the king and queen and the captain. There they are, sitting down at the table. Many servants carried the food on gold and silver dishes and set it in front of them, but before anyone could take a bite, hundreds of rats rushed into the room. Skittle, 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 skittle. The servants tried to drive them back with big sticks, but it was no use. In no time at all, the rats had eaten all of the food. The captain was astonished by this sight. He turned to the king and he asked, why do you put up with these rats, your majesty? There is nothing we can do about it, replied the king. Every time we sit down to eat, it's the same. My wise men have tried to make spells, but they haven't managed to get rid of the rats. Then why don't you have a cat? Asked the captain. A cat, said the queen. What is a cat? They'd never heard of one. So the captain described the cat. Then the king and queen told him there was no such animal in their country. I would give half a kingdom for a cat, said the king. The captain went back to his ship. He picked up Dick's cat and returned to the palace. He arrived just as a meal was being served. Look, there he is carrying the cat into the palace. And there's the king and queen and the princess. What are the rats doing? They're starting to eat all the food. The rats were beginning to eat all of the food on the gold and silver dishes. Zoom! The cat jumped out of the captain's arms. She killed dozens of rats and mice, and the rest of them fled in fear. Look, can you see them all running out of the door? Ah, they're going, help, cat's after me. The king and queen were astonished and delighted. Oh, captain, we must have that cat, said the queen. The king agreed to buy Dick's cat, and the queen asked to see what else the captain had for sale. The sailors carried to the king's palace all the goods they had to sell, and the king and the queen bought everything. For Dick's cat, the king paid 10 times as much than he paid for all the other things put together. He gave the captain a casket full of gold and jewels in exchange for the cat. And when the ship got home, the captain went straight to Mr. Fitzwarren and told him the news. Mr. Fitzwarren sent a servant to the kitchen, saying, "Ask Mr. Whittington to step up here, please." Dick thought the servant was making fun of him. But no. Mr. Fitzwarren handed Dick the casket of gold and jewels. "You are now a very rich man, Mr. Whittington," he said. "Your cat has made your fortune." Dick could hardly believe this good news. He thanked Mr. Fitzwarren and the captain with all his heart. Miss Alice was very happy to hear about Dick's good fortune. First, she said, "You must buy yourself some new clothes." Dick did so, and very smart he looked in them. Gosh, that's a transformation, isn't it? It's a bit of a makeover, we'd say these days. Dick was now a wealthy man. When he asked Mr. Fitzwarren if he could marry his daughter Alice, Mr. Fitzwarren was glad to give his consent. Some years later, Dick became Lord Mayor of London. Indeed, he was Lord Mayor of London 3 times. So the bells of Bow Church had been right when he heard them ringing, and he thought they were saying to him, "Turn again, Whittington, Lord Mayor of London. Turn again, Whittington, thrice Mayor of London." Wow, that would be something, wouldn't it? I wish I could sell holly for a casket of gold. What do you think? Do you think anybody would want holly? I'm not sure they would. Maybe I'd get £1 for her at the charity shop. But Holly's not for sale, is she? She isn't. I hope you enjoyed the book. I thought it was quite good, and there were nice pictures, weren't they? They were. Okay, well maybe Wei can read you another book soon. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you soon, very soon. Bye bye, and lots of love.